Hello, and welcome to this Wednesday's edition of A Walk in My Shoes. I'm Kayla Powell, and I'll be your host today. And on today's episode, we have with us Alexa Robinson O'Neill, who is a dietitian. Welcome, Alexa, and thanks for being with us.
Hi, Kayla. Thanks. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
So, Alexa, if you would like to tell us a little bit about what does a dietitian do?
That is a great question because one of the great things about being a dietitian is that you can do almost everything. There's such a wide range of skills and opportunities. So I'm more of a general purpose dietitian. What we do globally, I guess, is we're trained in the science of nutrition and how nutrition affects the human body in a disease state, in a healthy state, how to get healthy, stay healthy. So we can approach that a bunch of different ways. There are specifics where people would work in hospitals, maybe just with surgical patients, or some people specialize just with diabetic patients. Other people, I particularly work in health, wellness and sports nutrition. And there are people who specialize in the NICU for babies who are premature, where their food is so much different from a healthy adult's food. So lots of ways to specialize. Basically, we're trained in the application of science and treating people's health through nutrition, I guess, just all over the globe, I guess.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really great. So I think maybe a common question you get is, what's the difference between a dietitian and a nutritionist?
That is a very common question, and another really good distinction, because a registered dietitian actually is trained in the medical application of nutrition, and specifically in physiology and states of the body that we can technically write a nutrition or a dietetic prescription for someone, whereas a nutritionist is somebody who has studied nutrition, studied food, and there are lots of people who are nutritionists out there who do know a lot, but they don't have that extra training and they don't have to pass a board exam, which we do. You have to get a special license in every state that you practice in. You have to pass that board exam. So, but the other thing is, on the other end, you can have a nutritionist who maybe just took a quiz in a magazine and got a certificate. And, as I say, there are lots of great people out there who know a lot, but they can also give out some information that's maybe not as specific as we would like. Or if somebody does have a chronic illness or a disease, that person isn't necessarily the person to treat them. So we have more of a scientific background, I would say.
Okay. That's great. So what type of education did you have to go through to become a dietitian?
Okay, right now it's in the middle of changing right now. Right now you do have to have at least a bachelor's degree, and you have to be able to pass the board exam, and that also includes a 1,500-hour internship. So you can't even take the board exam until you've done your program and had your internship. And program three, the one that I went through, is called a coordinated program, where when you graduate with your degree, you've already done your internship as your rotations in your final year of your education, which is really nice because we've got it all done. In other programs, you can get your degree in nutrition, just a human nutrition degree, and then you go on after your college to do that 1,500-hour internship, which is about a year. So that's something that's really challenging for people to find those internships sometimes. But they come out every bit the same dietitian. They're allowed to sit for that exam as well. Starting, I want to say in 2022, maybe there's going to be a change in that they're going to be, let me get this right, a master's degree is what you'll have to do that. So we're really trying to look for ways to make that not be an obstacle for people who maybe before could have gotten a bachelor's degree, but it would have been a challenge to go on and get the master's degree.
Right.
So we're trying really to make sure that people find out that there are scholarships available, for instance, and that people know going in that they'll need to have certain classes so that they don't spend a lot of time spinning their wheels. So one thing that we as professionals want to make sure that it's a really accessible for people to get into. And one other thing is that there's a technician, a registered dietetic technician, which is an associate's degree, and they would work with dietitians, and they can do a lot of the same things, but they can't write prescriptions and give some of the same advice that we would give.
Okay. Wow. So having a master's degree, that's a pretty big requirement. Do you know why they're changing that requirement in 2022?
Sure, I can speak to part of it. I am not in on all of the details, and I know a lot of us have, well, you know what, is it really necessary? Because, we'll obviously all be the same still. I think the way that it's going, my feeling is that just like pharmacists now are PharmDs, doctor of pharmacy, there's a doctor of physical therapy. It's an extended, more intensive program. And I think a lot of it, and don't quote me on this, a lot of it's driven by the insurance industry as well. And it just adds that extra sort of level of cachet, maybe,
Right.
to say, oh, there's a master's degree involved. And I'm not speaking for or against it either way, but you're right. It's definitely a bigger undertaking, for sure.
And the 1,500-hour internship, that's quite a few hours, very time consuming. You really have to be dedicated.
You do. Yeah. So a lot of time, that's what's really nice about the coordinated program. And there are several of those around. It's not like there are only 3 or 4. So if that's something that someone's interested in, I always like to make sure that they know that that coordinated program is available, because then they're doing everything all at once and they graduate ready to take their exam.
Right. Right. Yeah, that definitely sounds like the better way to go.
It's easier because you don't have to spend that year.
Right.
For sure.
Right.
I mean, it's hard work. It's easier than spending the next year. Sure.
So can you tell us a little bit about your education? Where did you get your bachelor's degree from? Why did you choose that university?
Okay, I'm originally from northeastern Ohio, actually, the Youngstown area, and I ended up going to Ohio State. Kind of looked around, thought about different places. Ohio State looked like a great place. I actually thought that I was going to be an Ohio State cheerleader, and I was injured, so I never did that, but I went to Ohio State, and I ended up getting a degree in English. And I used that sort of as a researcher and writer for a while. I specialized in American literature and folklore. And I'm really glad that I did that, because it taught me to think and write. And then I took some time off to raise my kids. And I was always really active and really liked sports. And I would kind of help friends, like with a running program, for instance, or something like that. And so I decided that I would just become a personal trainer and strength coach. So I went and got that credential. I'm a certified strength and conditioning specialist. And I was a sport coach. I coached field hockey for a few years and always was very active and stuff like that. And I was really always interested in nutrition. And when I coached, I realized that just the sport skills and the game skills weren't what I wanted to limit myself to. I was really interested in making sure that our athletes had good nutrition advice. And I was so lucky that through my strength and conditioning career, I had met a dietitian who's a really well-known sports dietitian at Ohio State, actually. So she always helped me out with my team. She'd come over and talk to my team and a couple of other teams in the area. And I finally had sort of an aha moment where I thought, I think I really need to be a dietitian too. And so I talked to her about it and she said, yeah. Yeah. So it was really kind of fun to know that as a non-traditional, as an adult going back, I could also become a dietitian. So I actually live out on the east side of Columbus, and there's a branch of Ohio State near me that's about 10 or 15 minutes from my house. It's Ohio State Newark. And it was great because I was able to keep seeing my private personal training workout clients and go back to school because I had to then take classes like anatomy and chemistry and some additional math classes that I had not taken as an English major. So I was able to do all of those prerequisites at Newark, which was really wonderful. And it was a great experience. And then I applied to the program on the main campus at Ohio State, and I got into that program. And I spent 3 more years there. So that program's within the College of Medicine, and it was then called Allied Med. And so I traveled back and forth to main campus. And it was totally worth it. It was really fun, even as a non-traditional student, or maybe especially as a non-traditional student, because I had some experience then, and it was really fun to interact with students as well. So it was a great education, actually.
Yeah, that's an absolutely awesome story. And we
It was fun.
actually have some things in common. I'm also from the Northeast Ohio Youngstown area, and
Yeah, yeah. Wow.
I'm a Buckeye, so
There
OH.
you go. Right? Small world.
Yes. But your education is quite interesting. How you didn't start out in dietetics, but you found your way and you really enjoyed it, even as an adult. Um,
Very
so,
so.
can you speak to how, even as an adult, that wasn't a setback for you, that you were dedicated to your studies and passionate about um, dietetics, and that didn't
Sure.
stop you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think because I had found that that was where I really felt drawn, I felt like even though it was going to be hard, it was worth it. And it was hard at sometimes. I actually went back to college when my oldest child, my daughter, started her college career, and I still had a son at home in high school. So that was kind of interesting because I felt like I was juggling a little bit, but yet he was independent enough that he didn't need me hanging around all the time. And he actually, this is an interesting story. I had to get used to a new calculator because back in the Stone Ages, when I did college math, the calculators were really different. And I had to take another math class at Ohio State, and I needed a graphing calculator. And I literally did not know how to use it. I felt really silly. And my high school son had to give me a little bit of some pointers, which was really good. But it was worth it because at that point, as I said, I knew that I wanted to do that. And I had had enough experience with coaching and with my personal training. And so I felt like nutrition was such a natural fit that it was just something that I couldn't wait to learn more about because I knew that it would be worth it. Um, so it was really it was a nice way to kind of spend that transitional time actually, because it's a very focused program. You really, having done the requisites, I was ready to just sink right into the nutrition piece and some of the more advanced chemistry, which was really fun because it kept me on my toes and I wasn't able to just kind of glide, which was
Yeah,
nice.
yeah.
It's worth
That's
it. Totally worth it.
awesome.
Yeah.
So, do you have your own practice or are you part of another company? And where do you work out of? Do you have a location in your home? Do you have other locations across Columbus? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I actually do both. One of my internships when I was in school, I had a lot of really fun rotations actually. And one of them was in a weight loss clinic. And I ended up just loving that population. And they offered me a job before I graduated, which was a really, really nice way to make the transition. So I worked there while I was studying for my exam. I was able to work under their registered dietitians there. So that worked really well. And then since I had had my personal training private practice, I had put that on pause when I went back to school. So I basically rolled my nutrition into my personal training and came up with sort of a new company and resumed my private practice. So right now I'm in my private practice and I work time still at the weight loss. I sort of cover in there. I work when they need me or when some dietitians are on vacation or something like that. So it's really fun because I can stay with that population, but then I also have my private practice. So I have a small office in Columbus I actually haven't been there much because of COVID. And this is my home office, my private office here at home, where I work from my computer and my phone. And it's really nice. I actually have a, a privacy compliant app that I can use to talk with patients that's considered secure enough to use for medical purposes, like for the privacy part of it. So I can do it all from my computer and my phone, which is nice. And it's easy to keep in touch with my clients.
Yes, definitely very flexible, and especially during this time where we
Right.
can't always meet in person, having that face to face interaction through technology can be super helpful. Some people really need that.
Yes, absolutely. It's nice to be able to see the person too.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. But
So,
sometimes people will send me pictures of their food that they'll take a picture on their phone, which is
um,
great. So technology is awesome. I love it.
so having your own private practice, you're somewhat of an entrepreneur. Is it difficult to have your own practice and have work-life balance when work is at home for you often?
Absolutely. It's something that I have to think about a lot. And I'm one of those people who I switched back to a paper calendar because I really like seeing my whole day and seeing my whole week so that I can put my time in chunks because definitely it's easy when I'm here at home to decide, well, I think I'll go clean it or, oh, maybe I'll just take a walk. So that's a great thing because I think everybody should stand up and move around a little bit. That's just my little plug there for activity. Um, but I also am definitely aware that it can be overdone, especially when there's a big project looming and it'd be easier to go take a walk. Um, so
Right.
I definitely have to keep on track with that. But the thing is, a lot of my work is also putting together like checklists for people or just checking in with people or putting together handouts and those kinds of things. So it's good and bad that I don't need to work 9 to 5 necessarily. And I
Mm-hmm.
need to be available when my are available, which is a lot of times after work or on a Saturday morning or something like that. So it's a nice balance actually of being able to be at home and also kind of just work my schedule. It's a
Right.
great thing. Hmm.
And you mentioned COVID and how things are a little bit different nowadays. Has your clientele decreased or increased due to COVID? Are you seeing any new requests from clients? I know you can't talk about specifics with us, um, but are there any trends or increases or decreases in your business?
There are when COVID started last March, things really went down a lot, especially at the clinic. And then with my private practice, everything's been just kind of steady, I would say. And what I'm hearing a lot, and I'm getting some people who are saying, my friend's going to call you, is a lot of people are feeling like they're trapped at home and it could go a couple of different ways. They either want to cook more or they're feeling like they want to eat a lot of comfort foods, which those kind of have a bad name. Everyone thinks comfort foods are bad, you know. So, and a lot of people are, emotions and food go together hand in hand, and it's a very emotional time for a lot of people. And so sometimes people just kind of want to talk about it, like even boredom. Boredom. People will say, "Oh my gosh, I just feel like I want to eat." So a lot of my job isn't just strictly talking about calories and nutrients but listening to what people need and what people are thinking and how they're being affected. So I would say that COVID has definitely affected in the world of nutrition as well as business for sure. But I also see people who are paying attention to themselves and saying, I'm going to take this time and take care of myself, which is wonderful.
Yeah. Um, One of those questions you mentioned, am I hungry or am I bored? That's something I ask myself often, actually, when I'm ready for a
Join the
snack.
club. Right.
And it's usually because I'm
Exactly.
bored.
Usually, right. Or
Yeah.
sometimes it's because we're thirsty, I always find. Sometimes
Oh,
a drink of water will do that. A lot of people will say, "Oh yeah, you're right. I haven't had a drink of water in a while." But yes, there's definitely something to that boredom piece.
yes.
You're very good company.
So you mentioned that you don't have the typical 9 to 5 always, that some of your clients like to meet outside of the traditional office hours. What does your typical day look like?
Wow, I would say I don't have a super typical day, although definitely more typical now with COVID because I'm not going different places. In Before COVID, I would often meet people in my private office, and it would be like somebody, for instance, who's out working. Maybe they drive around a lot. They'll say, "Okay, I'll be on your side of town at 2 o'clock, so we'll meet from 2 to 2:45." And then the rest of the time, I'm making calls or doing emails, or as I said, like preparing handouts, working on my website, things like that. So now what I do is I pretty much make sure that I check my emails in the morning. I try to get a workout in mid morning because that I find that if I jump up and get a workout in first thing in the morning, even though that's what I would love to do, then I'm that person who's going to stick around like, well, no, I'll just eat something and then I'll clean a little bit. So I find that if I get up and get some work done right away, that's a really good thing. I get energized. And I always like to leave something undone on my desk so that when I come back, there's that thing to finish and get me back on track. That's been my COVID trick
Okay.
since I'm working at home. And then in the afternoon, I'll usually make calls and check up on people. I'll have somebody, for instance, who's like rehabbing from an injury or something like that. So I'll check in with them and find out how things are going, usually. One thing that I did during COVID, which was wonderful, was I was able to finish an online credential in sports nutrition because the COVID gave me a lot of extra time to do that. So, and the
Yeah.
fact that it was online, I got to work. My cohort was with people who were all over the country. So that was really, really exciting. And so that took up a couple of months. It's nice to just kind of be able to um, round up my clients now and make sure that I'm on top of everything and what everyone needs.
Yeah. Well, congratulations. That's an awesome accomplishment.
Thank you. I
Yeah.
love sports nutrition. I love it. I love my general nutrition too, but I sports nutrition is something where it's just kind of a different fun specialty.
From hearing you talk about all of nutrition and dietetics, we can tell that you're very passionate about what you do. And so, continuing education is something that some folks are very interested in. Once they have their degree, they're not just, okay, I'm going to work. They want to continue their education and they have to stay up to date on certain policies and procedures that are changing in their field of work. Do you often see that things are changing within dietetics that you need to keep up to date on?
Wow, what a good question. Yes, we do continuing education. We have to recertify every 5 years, and every year we have to do an ethics course that's preset, and then we can choose whatever else we want to do. But that's a great question. If things are changing, are in that there's always new research, which is exciting. 40 years ago, everybody thought that fat was a horrible thing, and now we're finding out that maybe it's sugar, not fat. So, and that's a really heavy lift too, because certain nutritional trends are kind of ingrained. And that's one part that I love about being the age that I am, but also having a fairly recent degree. I've been I've been a dietitian for 6 years now. So I find that I have the benefit of the newer education and the newer research, but yet a lifetime of experience with, just people, which helps. So what we're seeing too is lots of new research because science is just so advanced now, which is wonderful. And we're also seeing a lot of food trends, food fads. And I think it used to be kind of the food pyramid or, whatever was in vogue when everyone took their health class. And now there are, I think, also thanks to the internet, it's easy to find and it's easy to just jump online and you can find something for everyone and you can find pros and cons either way. And that's actually a part of my job that I love is talking about those food trends with people because somebody will call in or say, I want to do this diet. And that's what I found in my personal training was somebody would have gone to the bookstore and they'd find a diet book and say, I want to do this. And it's actually illegal in the state of Ohio to give nutrition advice without being a registered dietitian. So I love the part where people want to know what's actually good and what's maybe not so good. And I love to help educate people into how to find good information. If you look at a site on the internet that maybe is a little questionable, how would you know that? So I think that's a big part of dietetics that's changing, that there are just so many different options now. And I think that that's a great thing. But I also think it makes it difficult for people who maybe just are pummeled with ideas and, advice from everywhere.
Right.
So I see that as a big change in our profession. And there's a lot of great new food available too, which is nice.
Right.
People are trying new.
With everyone being completely different, I am very different than you, and I'm sure we eat very differently. Is it difficult to come up with a new plan for all of your clients? I'm sure there's no cookie cutter that you just prescribe or hand out to everybody.
Exactly. And that's the part that I love about it is that everybody is different. And I think that's where this profession is so fun because it's not just science, it's people too, and listening to people and maybe what their triggers are. Or I always ask people, what do you like? What don't you like? What have you tried? What would you be willing to try? Because you're absolutely right. Everyone's different and everyone's got a different situation. They might say, oh, my people that I live with, won't eat anything. I want to try stuff and they won't, or vice versa. I'm really picky, but my family eats X, Y, Z. So it's really fun to find out what it is outside of that cookie cutter that makes that person tick. And there's no one diet prescription that is for everybody. And I always like to make sure that I use the word diet in the way that it's not a thing that you do. It is just what you eat, because that's a big piece of the education that people will say, well, I'm going to be on a diet. And I just really like to point out that whatever you eat, that's your diet. And you don't even have to eat perfectly all the time because people assume that dietitians do and that we expect everyone else to. So I really like finding out what is it that makes that person tick and that's going to make that person feel good and be able to maintain their health, without going crazy.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, that a diet isn't something you do, it's what you eat.
Exactly.
I personally never thought of it that way either. I think of a diet as, oh man, I have to go on a diet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I'm concerned about too is because that word does have sort of a connotation of negative feelings for a lot of us.
Right.
And we're finding that younger and younger kids are, I hate to use this, but going on diets or knowing about diets, and they're not thinking in terms of, oh, this is just what I eat, or this is just what my family eats. So that's a big piece of what I love to do too, is hit that education piece where, this is the stuff that makes you feel healthy. And you know what? Yep, it's okay to have an Oreo sometimes. Might not want to make that your full-time meal plan, but I really like for people to find their comfortable space with food.
Do you think that children having access to technology or having a role model that's on a diet, do you think that influences them and children are dieting younger and younger now?
I love that question. I think you're absolutely on to something. I think that people do see, for years we've been arguing about the images that we see, perfect images. For a long time it was print magazines, now it's online. Sadly, there's bullying, there's fat shaming. It's stuff that we really do have to think about, and especially as parents, to kind of have those conversations with our kids that you're okay, you're good, I'm good. And there's a really neat trend that I love called Health at Every Size. You know what? Someone doesn't have to be a certain specific size or body shape to be considered healthy. And I think that you're absolutely right. Access to technology, it cuts both ways. There are great apps that people use, but some people don't like to use them. So I think all the success comes in having the conversation and being very open about what's useful and what kind of stuff we can kind of talk about and maybe just make adjustments to. So I think your kids are dieting younger and younger, and adults too are kind of getting pulled into that. Wow, look at everyone's perfect life on Instagram. Something must be wrong with me. And it's just about so much more than food.
Yes, yeah. Um, so you did mention a few moments ago that someone might come into your office from 2 to 2:45. Is a 45-minute time slot typical? If I were to be a new client of yours, what type of procedure would I go through um, to meet with you and then get on my correct track?
Okay. Yeah, 45 minutes is good. Sometimes an hour is great too. I find that over an hour, and I'm just talking too much. I'm giving people way too much information. Um, 30 minutes is great for a check-in for somebody who's already established, and we just need to check in, see what's up. Maybe we need to go over like what they've been eating for a week, or a lot of times it'll be, hey, I'm going on vacation. Well, not so much now, but when we go on vacations, help me plan ahead for that. I'm going to be here, here, and here. And we'd look at, how to kind of approach the whole restaurant situation, for instance. So it can vary about there, but as a new patient or as a new client, I typically like to do a lot over the phone or via email so that I can find out history, what your history is. If you're coming to me to maybe manage weight, where's the weight that you felt most comfortable, or what's your family eating habit look like? I get that kind of a background. I also like to do that in person, but then it's more of an hour and a half. That first appointment can get long.
Right.
So if we can kind of knock out a little bit on a phone call, and also if I send them some paperwork where they can answer, and I really do need to know, do you have any chronic diseases, any injuries I need to know about? What's your workout schedule like if you work out? Or maybe somebody is just, they're not necessarily, it's not always about weight loss. It's maybe about, I just want to improve the kind of the food that we have around. I want my family to cook together. Can you kind of help some meal plans, some grocery lists, things like that? So we'll get a lot of that background out of the way. And then usually our first meeting will be at least an hour. And then after that, 45 minutes is pretty typical.
And how often do you try to meet with your clients?
At first, we do a quick follow-up to make sure things are going all right, within the first week. And often what we'll do is have them do a 3-day food recall. And that's hard because people, when they write down what they eat, they get really self-conscious about it. So it depends on what they're comfortable with, whether I can just kind of talk them through, what did you eat yesterday? And do you remember if you ate anything, after you got up and stuff like that? So we'll kind of look at their food recalls. So sometimes they'll want to say, okay, now I want to do another 3 days where I kind of am thinking more about these kinds of options, or I can look at what they've eaten and I can say, there's a whole empty spot here in what you've eaten. Why don't we just try to include that? And I'll never give people more than 3 things to work on at a time. So that first follow-up after 4 or 5 days is just, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Is anything really not working? Because I always tell them they're more than welcome to tell me, this is not a good thing for me. This did not work. I gave it a try. I didn't like it. Or something they say, well, this really worked and I didn't know that it would. Let's try more of that. So that's always within the first week. And then I like to give at least 2 weeks out. And I rarely like to meet with somebody only once because that's sort of a band aid that it doesn't give them a relationship with me that we can follow up. So I always make at least 3 visits. And some people will go on, we'll talk every month, for instance, or just check in by text. So that first meeting is always within a week, and then usually 2 weeks out because it gives them a chance to hit their stride and really make a few little changes. And I'm talking little changes because that's the way it works best usually.
Okay.
Usually.
So you have a unique perspective because not only are you a registered dietitian, but you've worked with strength and conditioning. So when someone comes to you for some diet advice, do you also ever give out workout advice or encourage maybe different workouts based on what you're hearing their lifestyle is?
Absolutely. And it's a great combination. I really, really love the fact that I have that sort of double pronged approach because they do really go together. And it's really interesting too, because some dietitians that I work with if a patient will say, I kind of need a workout, they'll send them over to me and we'll kind of just talk about it a little bit. So I absolutely do. Sometimes people just are overthinking it, or they're getting kind of overwhelmed because they think, well, I can't go work out because I have to go to a gym and it's going to take an hour. And even now with COVID, that's even harder because don't know if you should go to a gym. And I've been giving people lots and lots of great exercises to do at home, like body weight exercises. We'll have somebody who just stands up every time they get on a phone call just to get out of their chair a little bit, or somebody who's been sitting a lot and their knee hurts, and I definitely am really careful about overstepping that bounds. Just like I was talking about the nutritionist versus the dietitian. I'm not a doctor. I'm not an orthopedic specialist at all. And I'm also not a therapist. So a big part of my job too is helping people kind of go, I might need a little extra XYZ. But yes, it's really nice to be able to say to someone, well, here are just a couple of exercises that maybe you can try. Or they'll already have a routine at the gym and maybe they're bored with it. And we can just take a quick look and kind of tweak it a little bit. So that's always fun too. Wow. Um, you know, yeah, I love my job and I love it. I love talking about it because I think it's something that people don't consider as a career a lot of times. They'll consider, I'll be a teacher, I'll be an engineer, dietitian, maybe. I'm hoping maybe some people haven't thought about it before who may. And I have to say, what I love about it the most is the interaction with people. There are clinical dietitians who work in hospitals and rarely talk to patients. They might be post-surgical, where that patient just needs nutritional support that they might be getting through a tube, for instance. And that's its own, that clinical piece. Or there are people who just work with cancer, for instance, and they're so good at that. And I would not be good at not being able to deal with people. So I think I would have to say my favorite part is being able to interact with somebody and kind of help them figure out, this is going to work for me. So that's my favorite part, I think. Aha. That's sitting at a desk. Yeah, exactly. It's really good to figure that out about yourself. I think one of the things that is great is that people can figure out what they don't like, and then that can steer you to what you do like, maybe. That is a big part of it because, as I said, food and emotions are really tied together. what I really love to do is just listen. And some people just need somebody to listen sometimes. Or they'll say, I had a really bad week. And so I like to just not push them. And the other thing is I feel it's really important to solve a problem or give them an answer or tell them what to think. When somebody's emotional, there's a reason for it, and they need to tell me what they're feeling. I don't need to tell them what they need. I need to listen and then kind of ask, what's that doing for you? Where's that putting you? What can I do to help? What would you like me to, you know? And sometimes some people might say, you know what, I'm okay now, or you know what, this isn't working for me. I need to just maybe go back to what I was eating for a while or whatever. But with an emotional client, I really like to give them space and know that they're being heard. So that's really it's yeah. Or maybe people aren't getting support at home and they need to be able to tell me that too. So I'm a safe person for them. Yeah. Oh, wow. Life advice as in for a career, you mean, or just in general? Career? Oh, I hope a lot of you out there are thinking about this. I would say do do a lot of different things in school and don't be afraid. Don't put yourself in a box where you say, "Oh, maybe I'm not great at science or maybe I'm not great at writing or I don't know anything about nutrition." If you feel like trying it out, I think it's really cool to just give it a try because guess what? There are experts there who are going to teach you chemistry and who are going to help you with math or help you with writing, for instance. And don't rule anything out and never take the first no that you hear as an answer. A very wise person told me that once, that sometimes people tell you no because it's easier, and if you really want something, say, you know what? I think I'm going to go to the next person and ask them. Or maybe I won't ask. Maybe I'll just do it. And just don't be afraid. Just know that you'll learn what you need to learn and you'll know when you're there. I would say just go for it. That I absolutely, everyone has those. I would like to meet somebody who never had a day like that. But I think for me, it's when I feel overwhelmed with kind of what we were talking about. If I have a lot of desk work and I think, oh man, I'm going to scream if I don't talk to somebody soon. And it definitely, I don't mean to make light of it. It can be really hard some days when I think, oh man, I'm reinventing this wheel. Or, oh, I've written this a million times and it still doesn't sound great. And then, kind of step away, maybe make a phone call to, a friend or a family member who I really like to talk with and just take some deep breaths and get some perspective. But it definitely, I think sometimes I have to get out of my own way. And, it's just helpful to keep that perspective, maybe. Yeah. Oh, hmm. People probably right now ask the most about healthy fats because there's so much information out there now about, sugars versus fats, and there are healthy fats and then there are unhealthy fats, and people go, what do I do? So I get asked about fats a lot, and I love to talk about healthy fats because they really are healthy and they're really good for us, and people want to know, where do I get them? What do I avoid olive oil? Well, no, you eat olive oil, you eat nuts and stuff like that. And I love talking about stuff like that. So I would say I get asked about those macronutrients, the carbohydrate, protein, and fat, most often because people really want to know what the story is on those because they've heard so much information out there. So that's probably the most that I get. Yeah, you know what? That's a really great question. And one thing, will you be able to post anything on your Facebook page that I could give you, like a link or something? Okay. The Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics is our sort of our governing organization, and they have a website called eatright.com, all one word, eatright.com, where anybody can go in. You don't have to be a dietitian, and there are lots of good bits of information there. Um, I do like to make sure that people are careful about where they go on the internet because anybody can pretend that they're an expert and get out there. But I would say try that eatright.com. And also they can ask their doctor, their primary care physician, or if they're at a clinic, they can ask if there's a dietitian that they work with because anybody would be willing to talk with them about what they do. And, you could talk with somebody in a hospital, for instance. And, especially for a teenager who's maybe even able to get high school credit for interviewing a professional, that might be a great way to kind of spend a half of a day.
Yeah.
But I'll send you some. I don't know of a book about dietetics, but I'll find out some resources for you, and I promise you I'll get those so you can post them.
Okay, perfect. Yes, that would be very helpful.
Sure.
Um, well, it has been great speaking with you today. Is there any one last piece of advice you'd like to give our youth or young adults watching?
You know what? I would say just get comfortable with food and engage with your family. Like maybe see if you can get the family to cook together. Just maybe try to do some grocery shopping together, or with COVID, since everything's limited, maybe just make your list together or come up with some different meals, and don't be afraid to try something different. Even if you don't like it, you try it once and then you try something else. And just to get experimental and get curious and have fun with food. I think that's the main thing. So,
And that's a great piece of advice because I'm a very picky eater and I know I'm hesitant to try new things. So I'll take you up
it's
on
hard.
that.
There you go. It's been really fun to be here, Kayla. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. And thank you for joining us, Alexa. So that's all for today's episode in A Walk in My Shoes. We will see you next week. Thanks for joining us.